Services Marketing, MKT 625, Lecture number 40.
Assalamu alaikum, Khawateen Hazrat. Wasim Hassan welcomes you to lecture number 40 of Services Marketing MKT 625 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. The topic of learning in this lecture is going to be communication, an area we are pretty much familiar with through our fundamental course on marketing. And if we have done brand management as well, so much the better. We all know that communication is one of the most important tools of marketing and a very sensitive variable of the marketing mix. When it comes to services, it becomes even more sensitive, for the simple reason that whatever we talk about through our communications is about what people do in services organizations. It is not something about a manufactured physical good which has been manufactured in a very standardized manner. It is about the actions of people, and actions which do have an inherent characteristic of variability. The meaning, actions of the same people can vary from situation to situation and from occasion to occasion. It is for this particular reason that communication stands out as one of the most important and sensitive variable of the marketing mix of services. It just so happens when we talk about the 7 P's of the marketing mix of services, the communication is always referred by the terminology promotions, and that also happens to be the case with physical goods. But the fact is that communication is what we refer to as promotions. Communications take place in so many different ways, and the traditional way of communicating with the external market or our customers is through advertising, which happens to be one of the most popular traditional tool of communication. But in services, it is not only advertising, it also is all that communication that takes place between the providers and the customers. And this communication takes place by way of personal selling, by way of encounters at the service counters, by way of encounters at the after-sale service counters, so on and so forth. So in other words, the people from within the organization could have a lot of opportunity of talking with their customers at so many different occasions, which mark encounters and also a possibility for communication. The most important factor here is that communication that takes place between the personnel from the services and their customers has to be very consistent. Because customers deal with different people within the organization, it is of utmost importance that whatever the talk has to be in line with the capability of delivery of service. If what is promised is different from the capability to deliver the service, there is a gap. And it is this gap which is known as gap number 4. And it is this gap that I'm going to talk about, meaning all those strategic areas which we have to deal with in order to minimize this gap. We know that there are 4 different gaps, of which we are pretty much conversant with the first 3 ones, and we know that even if an organization is in a position to fully understand the expectations of its customers, and it also is able to come up with the right standards and specifications to meet those expectations, and it also puts in place the right delivery mechanism because it has the rightmost people working for it, yet there is a gap. And that gap takes place between the delivery mechanism and the promises that are made in the marketplace. And don't forget that promises are made through communication, which is not appropriate or is not accurate to the point that the people are in a position to look upon the communication effort and the delivery as something very consistent. And when I talk about people here, I'm referring to customers. So why is it that there is a gap between the capability to deliver a service and what is communicated? Well, there are so many different reasons, and one of the reasons is a general tendency on part of the service providers to make too many promises or to overpromise. And the reason they overpromise stems from competitive pressures and an enthusiasm to win over customers and to add to the revenue stream of the organization. People have a tendency to overpromise because they think they really can entice customers toward the service they are selling. Now, this is a strategy that might work in a short run, but it can be very disappointing in the long run, because if you are exposed as a service seller talking about something which you cannot deliver, the gap still will remain. So the tendency to overpromise has got to be checked, because this is at the root of the gap which we are trying to learn in terms of closing it. There is another reason for this gap to exist, and that is we do not really educate our people in terms of the communications that take place. Now, this sounds very strange. How is it possible that we do not communicate internally with our people about the communication campaign that we have launched or just kicked off? Well, for the simple reason that we do not create a sense of ownership among our people about the positioning of our service product. This takes us back to the concept of the differentiation, the segmentation and positioning, and you know very well that whatever position you establish for the product that you're selling, may that be a physical good or a service product, the positioning of the product has got to be owned by each and everyone within the company. Or let's put it this way, by all those who really matter. And this means that the ownership has got to take place among all the functional areas of the organization. If the people do not know what the company is talking about, or if the people do not really know the rationale behind the decision which the top managers take about the kind of communication and the message they are putting across, then people within the organization are going to feel kind of unmotivated because they think their inputs have not been taken into consideration. Whereas the fact is that the service which is delivered by all of them is a combination of contributions put forward by all who are working for the organization. But for the simple reason that the rationale of the decision has not been communicated to those people, meaning there's so many different people within the organization, their communication with customers might take place at odd with what has been decided by the top management for what they call a formal communication campaign. And do not lose sight of the fact that I'm talking about services in which so many people have a chance to talk with customers and everybody can speak their own language when it comes to giving a certain message. So, in other words, what I'm talking about is that the message which is given by different people within the organization to the customers or to the outer environment is not really consistent. And that is the essence of the education that must take place among all working for the organization. Another reason for the gap to occur is mistargeted communications. The communication that takes place may be directed toward the wrong segment. This is what it really means. Or the communication which is directed toward the external market, they may be too generalized. Let us take the example of a real estate company which essentially specializes in the sale and purchase of the property. What is going to happen with all those customers who walk into the facility with rental property needs? They're going to feel disappointed because the company will tell them at that point they do not really deal in rental property, only because the communication which is taking place between the company and the market does not talk very specifically about the specialization of the company. It only is or will be through the word of mouth, the positive or negative, that people will know what the company really specializes in. and therefore the gap will occur. People will go back disappointed, thinking about the company as an entity which is not really serious about doing business. The company may have a lot of expertise in the area that it specializes in, but only because of the fact that communication is not appropriate and not really pinpointed and accurate, customers in the marketplace are going to have negative perceptions because their experience of the service with the company has not been positive. So the companies have got to be very careful and sensitive to the communication that they do with people. Another reason which really stems from what I've just talked about is the lack of proper positioning. This is a case which I just talked about, which reflects lack of proper positioning. If companies can overcome this problem, they will not be building up expectations of their customers to a point which is unrealistic, and where customers might think that the company overpromised. So in other words, what I'm saying is that through overpromising and doing different kinds of things that I've just talked about, companies that do have a tendency to build up expectations of their customers unrealistically high, and because of which they have to run into different kinds of problems. One of the most renowned problems with services is the lack of coordination between the marketing and operations. Despite the fact that they deal with something which is inseparable, meaning they are delivering something which is delivered real time, meaning just about the time when demand takes place, the consumption also takes place. And even given that kind of a situation, there is a lack of coordination between the two departments, and as a net result, they both fail. The reflection of marketing is seen in the 5 dimensions of quality, which are reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and the physical evidence. And the reflection of operations is seen at the time of delivery when it takes place. Both get exposed if they overpromised. Marketing people, like I said, could have a tendency to overpromise because they operate at a time when they are talking with their customers, doing personal selling, and therefore the personal selling is something that we must consider all the time. They make promises which cannot be delivered, and they make promises without taking operations into consideration or into confidence, because they talk about things which operations people do not really have capability to deliver, because of resource capability or because of certain other factors that might prevent them from delivering the kind of service and the quality which marketing people promise with their customers. And the result is when those customers come into the facility to buy that service, their experience is negative. And the net result is that they fail at the quality dimensions of the service delivery, which is a reflection of poor marketing. And they also fail when they deliver the service because it is not up to the expectations which were built up by the marketing people of the organization. Only because there was no coordination between the two. Only because they felt kind of motivated and got carried away by the competitive pressures just in order to win over their customers. But it does not really work. It might work, for some time in the short run, but in the longer term, it never works. So we have to see to it, we do not build up expectations of our customers to a point which we cannot achieve in terms of customer satisfaction and delivery of service. So the expectations remains an area to deal with. The other area where services, the people make quite a lot of mistakes is when they do not really educate their customers about the features of the service they are selling. And this holds true and carries a lot of weight when customers are going to experience the service for the first time. So in other words, when a new service is being negotiated with customers, it is the responsibility of the service providers to talk about all the features of the service so that people know what is in store for them. Not only that, providers could also have to talk about the evaluation criteria of that particular service. I'll tell you this with the help of an example. Just think of Hajj and Umrah, an example which I keep giving from time to time, being very appropriate and apt in terms of the services marketing practices. Let us assume that a company is selling a package to the first-time customers. What the company must do, talk about all the features of the service in terms of explaining different facilities which will be offered to the customers while they perform different rides at different points in time and at different occasions during the Hajj. If they do not tell them, or if they tell them something which they cannot deliver, that amounts to over-promising, and the result will be disappointment and dissatisfaction on part of the customers. Now comes the other part, which is educating the customers about the evaluation criteria. Now, how is it that providers can do even before they have sold the service? Well, this is where they make their service credible, and in particular the A service, which is quite very rich in terms of experience and credence properties. You remember all that, what I've been talking about in the very beginning of the course. And Hajj and Umrah package certainly are those products which are very rich in experience. So providers have got to talk in detail about all the features, basically trying to make sure that customers do not fear anything, meaning they've got to manage in advance all the risks which customers might think about before they have bought the service. You will recall the risks involved in the pre-purchase process. And you know very well, the customers do have a way of evaluating a service before they have bought it. Their mind races about so many risks involved in buying a service they have not experienced before, to which they have not exposed before. And there are so many different kinds of risks. In the first place, it is the performance risk. They think all the time, God knows if this provider is going to come up to his words, and God knows if the service is going to be up to the mark. It is going to be exactly according to what they're talking about, whether they have the capability or not of delivering what they're promising. Another risk associated with the pre-purchase evaluation process is the financial loss. When they think of the performance loss on part of the provider, they also think of the financial loss which they might have to incur only because the provider may not be in a position to deliver the service according to their expectations. And then there are so many different kinds of risks: psychological risk and time loss risk and opportunity risk. They might think later, if they are dissatisfied, they should have gone to somebody else, but then it is too late. So this is the criteria which the provider must talk about before he has sold the service. In other words, the seller must talk about all the measures and the safety valves that he has put in place in order to take care of the risks which customers might associate with the service before they have negotiated the service or while they negotiate the service. And the fact is that all good companies do that because they know that while they have to win over their customers by talking about the features, meaning good features of the service, they also have to be mindful of the limitations that they may have in delivering the service. And they do talk about the limitations as well. And they might have to talk about those limitations in response to so many questions which intelligent customers like to ask. You know, there are different kinds of customers who involve themselves with the negotiating process at different lengths. And therefore, good companies must talk about the limitations which they think their the services do carry as inherent features. Good companies are not really apprehensive about losing a business only on account of talking about limitations. As a matter of fact, that reflects their credibility because they're straightforward. And the good companies are the ones which carry services with more plus points than the minus points. And while they talk about the evaluation criteria, they also talk about competition. They must be in a position to talk about different features offered by their competitors, so that the customers are in a position to compare the service they are negotiating with others available on the market. And the next area sellers must talk about in terms of educating their customers about the evaluation process is the encounters. And that is where the real action takes place. Meaning, when they talk about the ability to take care of the different risks that customers associate with the service, they must also be in a position to talk about all those practical actions which they will take while they offer the service, so that customers know what will come when the service will be delivered. So companies have got to be mindful of the fact that customers need to be educated about that service which they are going to experience for the first time. If we are clear about the experience and credence properties of services, we should not really have any problem understanding this particular concept. So the essence is that we educate our customers about the product features, and at the same time do not overpromise, because we are undertaking communication. Another area where the problem of gap takes place is the inadequate internal marketing communications. And this is something which we have learned in so many different contexts during the course. And again, we are at a point where we have to understand and appreciate the need for all to be on the same page when it comes to communicating with our customers. Meaning, there has to be complete coordination among different functions of the organization, just in order to make sure that everybody speaks the same language and everybody delivers a consistent, unified message. The problem occurs when the coordination that does not really take place, and the people from different departments do not really know what to talk about and what not to talk about, what is to emphasize and what not to emphasize. It is the decision of the top management to make sure that internal marketing communications or internal communications which are part of internal marketing do take place in a manner that people within the organization coordinate their efforts in terms of communicating a unified message. Miscommunication between the marketing and operations was exemplified when I was talking about overpromising and building up expectations of customers to an unrealistic level. Similarly, if there is a miscommunication between the marketing and HR, for example, again, it is going to create a lot of missing links and a lot of dots which will need to be connected. You can use your imagination to think of similar situations which might create some undue challenges and problems for the organization, only for the fact that the people within the organization could have not really coordinated their efforts. And therefore, whoever interacts with the customer may talk about something which is at odds with a unified communication message. Well, in that situation, there will be no unified message. All I'm saying is that it will worsen the situation, because different people will talk in different terms. They will all be talking from a position of sincerity, But the only thing is, they may not be talking about the same position which the company should take in order to communicate with the marketplace. So we can summarize all the problems and challenges that companies face when it comes to communications. We have seen there's a problem of overpromising, that we have seen there's a problem of building up unrealistic expectations, and we also have seen there's a problem on part of the providers not to educate their customers when it comes to selling the service for the first time. And we also have seen there are some internal problems in terms of lack of coordination for having a unified communication among all the departments of the organization. The fact is that even if you are a part of a very, very small company comprising of just about a couple of managers and a few workers, you have to think about a unified communication message. Do not take things for granted and do not assume anything, thinking that it is such a small company that we all keep communicating with each other informally so extensively that there are no chances of miscommunication or over-communication or under-communication. It will not work. The fact is that you've got to undertake a well-structured effort in order to make sure that everybody must understand what to talk about and what not to talk about. So in other words, we have to deal with these challenges, and these challenges could become the strategic areas that we have to manage in order to come up with the right communication process. And before I start talking about the strategic formulations, let me talk about the tools that we have available to us in order to manage those tools effectively, to in turn be effective in managing our strategies. I'm not going to talk too much in detail about the tools because those belong to the very fundamental and basic area of marketing with which we have a lot of familiarity. But in terms of the services marketing, just keep in mind that these tools go much beyond the advertising and traditional promotions. We have to manage the tools like the advertising, promotions of different kinds, personal selling, which is a huge challenge for services marketing people. Then we have to manage all the encounters in terms of communication. I'm not talking about delivery mechanism here, I'm talking about the communication process that takes place between the customer and the provider. So encounters of different kinds, meaning the service desk, the after-sales service desk, and so on and so forth. And web-based advertising, web-based interactions of so many different kinds because we have a lot of options for online applications. We have to pick and choose those tools which are most appropriate and compatible with the nature of service that we are selling and which are relevant in any given particular situation. Whatever tools we pick and choose, those have to be integrated because the answer lies in integrating the communication campaign. And we can have an integrated campaign only if all the people within the organization could work together in a way that their contributions are reckoned with, and they also are made known of the contributions which are making that communication possible, and then they can develop a sense of ownership in that kind of communication. So managing these tools becomes extremely important, not only from the point of view of what I just talked about, but also for another reason, which again develops expectations of our customers to an unrealistic level, and that is the competitive environment. This is a factor which I did not talk about earlier. The fact is that this is an added factor which builds up expectations unrealistically and creates overpromising. We cannot control the competitive forces because we cannot control their communication campaigns. What if somebody else also talks about his service in a way that it builds up expectations of customers unrealistically high? There's nothing that we can do about that. We cannot control those extraneous factors. So all the more reasons that we have to have an integrated communication campaign which is based on reality, so that we can influence our customers and keep them from any unrealistic influences created by our competitors. When we talk realistically about our service and deliver what really matches the promises, then we have a very positive reputation in the marketplace. So at least we can influence our customers and nullify those factors which are beyond our control. And therefore, managing different tools of communication becomes even more important given this factor of integrated marketing communications, because they can check competition and they can also make the competition aware of the fact that they should not be overpromising and they should not be doing all those things which I just talked about in terms of our learning the challenges that service providers face. So how is it that we really can come up with an integrated campaign which is a reflection of complete coordination among different departments of the organization, and which really manifests a unified, consistent message which has no ambiguity and which is crystal clear? Well, that takes us back to the services triangle. And I hope you remember the concept very well, in which I talked about three different types of marketing: external marketing, interactive marketing, and internal marketing. The fact is that we can make use of these three types of the marketing campaigns in order to have an integrated marketing communication campaign, because we know that our customer in the services area is a target of two marketing campaigns, meaning two different types of marketing campaigns. The first is external marketing, and that is something I've been talking about so far, and the other is interactive marketing. And we also know that the external marketing consists of the advertising and all those traditional tools which I just talked about, and those are meant to create basically awareness, persuasion, reminders, and inducement. We know very well that these are the four basic objectives of any communication campaign: that we create awareness, that we persuade our customers, and we give them reminders, and we induce them to take the action. The action has to be taken in our favor so that they can come buy our product, meaning our service product. This is what external marketing is all about, and we also know that this is where the action just starts, meaning the action of communication, nothing more than that. And this is where the marketing campaign has got to be very realistic, taking into account all the strengths of the organization and the weaknesses, so that we do not talk about the weaknesses, we capitalize on our strengths, and while we do that, we take our people into confidence so they know what we are going to talk about. As a matter of fact, there are many experts who say that the people should be shown any advertising campaign before it is kicked off. Anyway, there's so much for external marketing in this particular context. Let's talk about interactive marketing, about which we already have familiarity. And we know that this is a stage where the real action of buying and selling takes place, because this is the stage where encounters take place. And this is the point where promises are either kept or broken. Why do I say that? Well, the promises are kept if there is no gap between the communication and the delivery mechanism. Promises are broken when we are not in a position to deliver what we promised. So in other words, if there's an overpromise, there's going to be a gap, and that gap is going to be exposed right here while we interact with our customers. So the interactive marketing is all about interactions that take place between sellers and customers, not only in case of the delivery, but in terms of communication also. Keep that in mind. And this takes into its fold very comprehensively all the departments of the company and all the people who are responsible to deliver the service. And the fact is that each and everyone who is part of the organization makes certain contribution toward the delivery of the service. So everybody is a part of interactive marketing. Interactive marketing also takes into account suppliers, because if suppliers have certain constraints to supply goods, if we are dealing with the hybrid services, we are not in a position to keep our promises. Let us talk about a service which is more toward the pure side and not really is a hybrid. You happen to be the business center and are not in a position to deliver color photocopies to your clients only because the supplier was not in a position to supply you the ink and the cartridges on time. This is a classic example of suppliers going wrong and doing something which might keep you from delivering the service the way you had promised. So what is it that can correct the situation or keep the situation from happening in the very first place? Well, the answer lies in the efficacy of internal marketing. We know that internal marketing is an area which creates the enabling environment. It is the area where people get prepared with motivation and enthusiasm to deliver the service the way it is promised. And it has to be a realistic promise. That's all I'm saying. So the concept of three marketing practices cannot really be effective until the time it is very well aligned. And in order to align the two marketing campaigns or the two marketing areas of external marketing and interactive marketing, it is of utmost importance that we have in place the concept of internal marketing so that we have the environment, the internal environment just about ready and conducive, encouraging for external and interactive marketing to be effective and successful. So in other words, what I'm saying is that in order to make sure that we really minimize the gap number 4, we have to see to it that there is no gap between external marketing and interactive marketing. And that gap can be filled up only by having that proverbial enabling environment within the organization. If we have that kind of environment, it means we have very well coordinated communication efforts, and those efforts reflect themselves while we deliver the service, because we come up to the expectations of our customers. We may not be very, very high on the scale, but we certainly exceed the adequate level of expectations. Remember that concept? You have to be very close to the desirable level. As a matter of fact, you should transcend that level and get close to the ideal level. If that is not possible, at least you have to be much above the adequate level. And you'll be above that level only if you have the enabling environment and if you have a communication campaign which is very well integrated. Because otherwise, the message given by the company is not going to be unified, not consistent. And therefore, the importance of integrated marketing communications. This brings us to the next area of learning, which is about understanding objectives of communication. We know from our fundamental marketing course that objectives of communication are rather common among different kinds of physical goods and services products. There are just a couple of objectives that are very peculiar to services, and I will be talking about those for your understanding and appreciation. But let us try to freshen up our knowledge about what these objectives are. We know that in the first place, we have to identify the market, which is identification of our potential customers along with existing customers and all those people who make the purchasing decisions. And after having identified the market, we go ahead with certain objectives, and those are known as communication objectives. Just like I was talking about the overall name of the area, which is communication objectives. And there we pinpoint whether we are communicating for the purpose of creating awareness, imparting knowledge, developing liking and preference for our service product, or they want to do something which will induce action on part of the customers in favor of our service and bring us to our service scape. The third objective of the communication is a decision on budgeting. Again, we know from our understanding that it is all about allocation of the total amount of money to the overall communication campaign with a breakdown of different areas like how much to advertising, how much to promotions, how much to internet, and so on and so forth. After we have decided on the budget, we create a message. As a matter of fact, creating a message is something which can happen simultaneously, but I'm talking about these objectives one by one. Creating a message is very comprehensive and very sensitive because this is where the essence of communication comes in, and this is something which really takes us back to the area of the segmentation, the points of differentiation and positioning of our product. We know that we have to set our service product apart from the competition, and that is the real essence of positioning. And we have to do that in order to highlight the point of differentiation with operational excellence and our delivery the mechanism, which should be different and better than the competition. So we create a message and decide what to say, when to say, and who will say that, meaning who will deliver the message, and what will be the vehicle or the vehicles or the tools. And like I said, this happens to be one of the most sensitive area. And the reason I said this is something which happens simultaneously because until the time we have taken a decision on creating a message, we really cannot talk about the budgeting and all that. I'm just talking about different objectives that we have in order to communicate. So do not be impressed by the order that I'm talking about. The essence of learning is that we must know what are the points that we consider while we come up with a communication campaign. So back to what to say and how to say that. Positioning is the answer, and in order to decide the positioning and establishing which the point of differentiation to highlight, because there could be different points of differentiation and there could be different areas which are of a strength, and the one that we pick up and establish as a position has to be the one on which there's a consensus. And for that, we can go into the marketing research, and I'm talking about all these factors just in order to develop some linkages with the concepts that we have learned so far for our own benefit. And we establish the positioning with the help of the marketing research by asking a few customers what do they think about various possibilities of positioning. And you will recall that we have to think in terms of what is the best position that really enables us to capitalize on our strength, and what is the best position which really can reposition our competition, meaning can capitalize on the weaknesses of our competition, and what is the position which really entails the simplest kind of message which should home in to the minds of our customers. So these are the points which we all know, and we have done a lot of study about. Another objective is choosing the media, meaning all the vehicles and the tools that we think that we should be putting together to come up with the integrated or marketing communication program. The next one, and in generality, the last one is collecting feedback. You collect feedback basically through research just in order to establish how effective is your communication program. So this is all about feedback. You do not go for the feedback which tells you how well the service product is delivered are not delivered, because that is something which you can do and should do with the help of so many other marketing research programs that we already know. But here you generate the feedback just in order to establish the effectiveness of the communication program. A few objectives that we have to learn in the context of services are that we have to reduce the purchase risk. This is something that I did talk about when I was talking in relation to the over-promising, building up of expectations, and in particular reference to educating our customers about features of the service. Whether you are selling that service to customers for the first time, or you think you still have the need to talk about those features in a way that they stand well educated about the benefits they will enjoy by buying your service, should be the part of the objectives of your communication program. So I think this objective should be pretty much clear in our minds. The next one is to reduce cognitive dissonance and increase purchase probability. This is a very interesting objective of communication in the context of services. We therefore have to understand what this concept of cognitive dissonance is. Cognition basically is a mental process through which we acquire knowledge. And in very simple words, cognition basically is understanding. Dissonance is the state of inconsistency and disagreeableness which create a state that inhibits us from understanding things. So in other words, it is a state which creates some conflicts in our minds, creates confusion and lack of clarity, and therefore keep us customers, I'm representing customers for the time being, it keeps us customers from fully understanding the service. So the objective of communication here is to reduce this cognitive dissonance. And once we are in a position to reduce that, which we do with the help of certain strategies I'll talk about in the next lecture, we really can increase the purchase probability. Not only purchase probability, we also can strengthen the probability of repurchase, meaning repeat purchases. So this really happens to be one of the most important and at the same time interesting objectives of the services marketing. The next one is to enhance the customer satisfaction. We cannot do that until the time that we really have taken care of the objectives that I have talked about, meaning the complete evaluation process which starts with taking care of the certain risks customers associate with buying services, and then getting on to the cognition side of the services, because services happen to be complex in the sense that people have not seen them, they have not experienced those until the time they really buy those. And therefore, in order to enhance customer satisfaction, we have to go through all these objectives, do things which are appropriate in relation to achievement of these objectives, so that we really can go for achieving satisfaction on part of the customers, and then enhance that. And the understanding that we have developed in relation to quality aspects and the quality satisfaction relationships is just about adequate to understand what this objective is all about. The next objective, which again I would say is kind of common between the goods and services, is developing and further enhancing the brand equity and company image. And that is something which we do with the help of so many different things, of which the quality and satisfaction in relation to services is extremely important. But the other objectives, starting with reducing performance risk and reducing the cognitive dissonance, reinforcing the purchase behavior and repeat purchases, and customer satisfaction, are those objectives which I would say are quite very peculiar to services, and therefore have to be viewed in a separate light. In the light of all those concepts and learning that have taken place so far. With that, I would say that the learning about the concept of today's lecture is complete now, and I would like to give you a brief summary of this with the indication of what lies ahead in the next lecture in relation to communication, of course. Well, I started talking about the importance of communication in the context of services, because services are all about promises, meaning all about what people do in order to deliver a service. They do not deliver something manufactured in a factory. They deliver something which is either hybrid or something very pure in terms of experience and credence properties. And therefore, the importance can hardly be overly emphasized. I talked about those areas which offer themselves as the challenge areas in terms of the promises that we make with our customers. I did talk about the tendency of providers to overpromise due to certain given reasons, which I talked in detail during the lecture. And I arrived at the conclusion that in order to come up with a communication campaign which is well integrated, we have to take the different people from different disciplines within the organization into confidence, so that they feel motivated and confident that their contributions are taken into consideration, and they are educated on what is going to be said, when and where, meaning through which vehicles. The vehicles or tools of communication that we pick up as part of the integrated the marketing communications the program should be the ones most appropriate and relevant with the nature of the service and the need for communication at a given point in time in the light of all the objectives that I have talked about. The next area of learning is going to be about the problems that I talked about, meaning the promises, expectations, the education of customers, and integrated marketing communications. Because if these happen to be the problem areas, these also have to be the strategic areas that need to be managed. And therefore, wait until the next time I talk about these. Thank you very much for the attendance, and I look forward to talking with you in the next lecture. Allah Hafiz until then.